Welcome. I am your host, Elaine Miller Karras, and I am so grateful to have with me today one of my colleagues, Kay Thomas. And I'll say a little bit more about her in just a second, but I also want to just thank our sponsor, the Trauma Resource Institute, a nonprofit that I can't believe I helped found over almost 20 years ago. And I'm so grateful for their sponsorship of our program. But I want to say a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today before I introduce Kay more formally. So, first of all, our podcast name today is Two Pilgrimages, Two Generations, One Transformative Journey. What happens when we step away from the noise of everyday life and allow our feet to carry us towards something greater than ourselves? So, in this episode of Resiliency Within, Kay is joining me as we explore the profound physical, emotional, and spiritual transformations that unfolded during what I'm going to call, Kay, two remarkable pilgrimages. I will share my experience walking the Camino de Santiago in my 70s, while Kay reflects on their journey to Machu Picchu in their 30s. Though our paths lead us across different landscapes and cultures, I think they revealed strikingly similar truths about resilience, which we often call well being, healing, purpose, and self discovery. So, let me say a little bit about Kay before we start talking about these experiences that we've had. So, first of all, Kay works for the Trauma Resource Institute, and Kay, we have known each other for a long time, haven't we?
Yeah,
How many
yeah.
how many years have we known each other
Almost a
now?
decade.
It's been a decade. So I met
Mhm.
you when you were just first becoming a therapist.
Yeah.
But she is I'm so happy to say she's the director of education and training at the Trauma Resource Institute, where they oversee the training and consultation of the community resiliency and trauma resiliency models. Kay is a licensed professional clinical counselor in California, providing somatic therapy to the LGBTQ plus community and creating trauma and resiliency informed programming for LGBTQ plus leaders across the nation. Kay has worked extensively as an educator, community advocate, and trauma therapist, holding a BS in psychology and women's studies from Old Dominion University, as well as a master's in counseling from the University of San Diego. Kay has worked with people impacted by sexual and relationship violence since 2010, working in areas of anti human trafficking, higher education, military service, juvenile justice, and incarcerated populations. Kay is just a person who doesn't stop in her ideas of helping you, really humanity. Kay, you really are that kind of
Yeah.
person. And Kay lives in San Diego with their family. And when they aren't advocating for social justice, Kay can be found reading a good book, working on houseplants, recording music, or playing video games. By the way, recording music, I was happy to hear her singing a very favorite song of mine and and theirs. Should we say which one it is?
It is Pink Pony Club by Chapel
That's right.
Roan. You know,
Yes,
she just really gets your body moving. She does.
how she does. And when I heard your singing of that song, I was so excited. Where I still might get you to do something with that someday, Kay. So
Maybe.
I'm not done with kind of maybe twisting your arm just a little teeny bit.
Maybe. We'll see. We'll
Yes.
see.
Well, let me just say as we continue is that Kay and I were talking this week about our shared journeys that we just happened with
Mhm.
Kay going to Machu Picchu and me going to Spain to and walking the Camino de Santiago, that we had some very similar reflections. And it was very powerful for both of us. So we thought, well, let's talk about it together here on Resiliency Within, because we're hoping that we might inspire some of you, whether it is to take one of these journeys, which I could only say was enlightening for me, amazing, inspiring when I met so many people around the world. But also, if it's just a reflection, time of giving space, being quiet when we have life that can be so full of noise. So, Kay, I am going to turn it over to you to talk about the journey that you had, and then I'll talk a little bit about the Camino, and we're going to talk back and forth together about our shared experiences.
Well, thank you so much for having me on today, Elaine. I'm really excited to talk about this trip. I think I'm going to share some photos, and I think this trip for me was a beautiful surprise. I wasn't expecting it to be as spiritual as it was and as meaningful as it was. I had a chance to go to Peru, so I went to Peru for 12 days in total, but 10 days of traveling in country. And I had a chance to go with my baby sister, Lydia, who is my travel buddy. She and I have done one additional international trip, and so we decided to do Peru this time. And
And can I just say to our listeners on Voice America, we will be posting this on YouTube so that you can see the pictures that you can't see now because you're just going to hear our story at this point. But
yes,
both Kay and I have put together a small little slideshow of our experiences, so you will be able to see that on YouTube later. So go ahead, Kay,
absolutely.
continue. Yes.
Yeah, the photos that I took on the trip all were just from my iPhone. They weren't anything special, but it was such an incredible experience to visit so many different microclimates across Peru. We actually started, and if you're following us on YouTube right now, you'll see a photo of us actually out in the desert in southern Peru. We drove all the way down to this place called Huacachina, which is a desert and has this beautiful oasis in the middle of the desert that we were able to go to. And every day that we were in Peru, we got to experience something different. We decided to go to Peru because a very good friend of mine from undergrad moved there about 4 or 5 years ago and decided to start a travel company as a way to pay for her cost of living. And she helped us plan this entire trip. Her company was incredible. They're literally called Peru Incredible, is the name of their organization. And, it was such an interesting experience for me because my little sister and I actually trained because we knew that altitude sickness was going to be a thing we might experience. And we knew that we'd be hiking a little bit of Machu Picchu. We would be hiking this other place called Rainbow Mountain, which is over 16,000 feet above sea level, and that we might be doing some hiking in some other places too. So we actually started training together about 3 or 4 months before the trip and trying to go on a hike every weekend or so.
And can I just add that I think that was really important too for my
Yes.
journey is that I don't I would not suggest that you go, oh, I'm just going to get a backpack and walking sticks and I'm going to
No,
show up in Spain or Peru and go on my trip. So
no.
I also did the same thing that I
Yeah.
practiced. Now I wasn't going to go to the high altitudes like you, but I wanted to make sure that I was going to hike for extended periods of time, like
Yeah,
like 6 to 8 hours practicing before I went to Spain, knowing that I would maybe even be walking for longer periods of time. So, what
absolutely.
we're saying is the preparation's important, isn't it?
It
Yes.
is. It's so important. And I think it was interesting. My little sister and I had never really hiked before that. We didn't really know what we were getting into. And, as we started hiking together, we both realized, like, wow, actually, I really like hiking. I like being outdoors. There's something so beautiful about putting my phone away and being able to just be fully present and connect with nature in a different way than we had before. And so, even just kind of noticing as I reflected back on our journey that I was already starting to prepare myself spiritually for some of the things that I needed to encounter on my journey. Um, and so as we went on our journey, we had that incredible opportunity to meet with multiple indigenous groups. This is the Imara is one of the groups that we got to meet with, and they shared with us how they cultivated potatoes, like natural cultivation. The Incans were actually the first to cultivate potatoes, and so they shared this experience with us. We got to try potatoes and tubers I didn't even know existed. And really, that was kind of what initially opened our hearts to this concept that we kept hearing about repeatedly through our time called Aini. And Aini is a Quechua word, and it means this idea of mutual reciprocity, or for you today, for me tomorrow. And so, this concept of how do we care for each other and stay in community, not just caring for our own bodies, but caring for the land, caring for the people that we love and we care about. And so, that really became a central theme throughout our time together. Lydia
And
and I, oh my
can
gosh,
I just say, as you're saying that, I'm thinking about just the organization that we both work
yes,
with, and how that really is so embedded in our philosophy.
that's right.
Of and I think it's and I really had a similar experience in Spain as well.
Yeah,
But what you just said about that reciprocity and how, like, when we talk about our nervous systems when we're in alignment, that
yes,
not only does that help us, but it helps people that we are in
absolutely.
relationship with, and that comes back to us. So that
Absolutely.
rhythm, that organicity, I think, of nature was something that I experienced on my journey. And it certainly sounds like very similar in your experience, Kay.
Absolutely. I mean, it was such a profound, when I first heard it, I actually was like, oh my gosh, that, and I thought of my job and the things that I do in the world. And it was such a profound experience. And Lydia and I like to get tattoos together when we travel. So I actually got the word I need tattooed on my arm while we were there. And, just really exploring this idea of like, wow, how do I make sure that while I'm on this journey, I'm caring for myself so that I can care for others when I return, but also how am I caring for this community of me and my sister and the people that I'm meeting along the way? We had many guides who were indigenous from different tribes across Peru and really sharing with us their own experience was so beautiful. And one of our guides, Miguel, he was the one who took us to Machu Picchu and a couple of other places and really taught us a lot about Incan culture and different indigenous cultures. And really, he was one of those folks that he motivated us to keep going every day, whether it was like a little, a joke or a word of encouragement. We didn't do the full hike of Machu Picchu, which is like 4.5 days and is a lot of stairs. So just warning people who are interested, it's a lot of stone stairs. It will make your thighs burn. But even us just climbing the spaces that we were in Machu Picchu, reminding us, hey, we can stop here and we can rest if you need to for a moment. Do we need to pull out anything to help your breathing? Let's take a picture together. Let's talk about this environment together and learn more. And so he really just drew us in a way that was so incredible. And so, Machu Picchu was an incredible space, but we had really been training for altitude because we also wanted to go to this place called Vinicunca or Rainbow Mountain, which used to be a big glacier. So if you're following with us on YouTube, you'll see that striated mountain in the background. That all used to be a glacier and they're mineral deposits. And so this place, people only started visiting it about 10 years ago. And to get to the very top of the summit, it is 16,500 feet above sea level. So it is a challenge. And I really wanted to challenge myself to do it. I love physical activity, but I've never been one to kind of challenge myself in this way. And so they told us, well, to help with your endurance, you can take a horse to the bottom of the summit. And I'm scared of horses. I like the idea of horses, but I'm scared of horses. And so I was like, well, if I want to make it to the summit, I'm going to have to do everything I can to help my body. And, just getting out of the car when we first got there and going to, walk to the restroom, I was like, man, I'm out of breath because the altitude is so high. And so we rented horses, and you'll see if you're looking at the photo, a picture of somebody guiding the horse. And I used all of my skills from the community resiliency model of I'm noticing my hand making contact with this saddle right now. I'm gonna shift and stay to the beautiful sights around me. I'm gonna notice my breathing. I'm gonna take a sip of water. I'm gonna do all the things that I know help my body so that I could fully stay present in the moment and not feel overwhelmed by like, I've got this giant animal that I'm riding and I don't know how to ride it and I don't know what's going to happen. And what happens if the horse decides to run away and the woman's not holding it anymore, right? So all of those pieces of really like checking in with myself spiritually of like, how can I keep myself continuing on this journey? And then we got to the base of the mountain, and it's pretty much just a almost very difficult vertical climb from there of about 500 to 1,000 feet, depending on how high up you go from there. And so again, working with Lydia made the decision to stay towards the base of the mountain. And I was like, you know what? I really want to challenge myself to do this. And it was the hardest physical thing I've ever done. When I say hard, I mean like you would take 15 steps. I'd challenge myself to take 15 steps, and then I'd have to stop and catch my breath because the altitude impact was so intense. And it was really cold. Like you're surrounded by glaciers at the top of this mountain. So it is biting wind, and you're seeing people kind of fall off to the side and using oxygen, those oxygen shots that they have. And I'm like,
Yes.
this is really intense. And so again, our
And can I just say too, I think one of the things that you said is that you wanted to stay in the present moment.
yes,
And when you do something that is so physically arduous, and here you are
yeah.
a young person in your 30s, I'm an older person in my 70s, having done something a little differently, but felt that oh my,
Yeah.
I don't know if I can take one more step.
Yes.
And my experience was it was 20 degrees hotter in Spain than usual because there's been a heat wave in
Wow.
Europe, right? But I
Yeah.
think that the idea that it's not a competition.
It's not.
Yes, and when you remove the noise of what sometimes we live with in our very busy lives
Yes.
and say, what if I do just stay present and
Yeah.
say, well, maybe my feet can make it 15 more steps,
Yes.
and maybe it can make it 10 steps, but
Yeah.
I can take one step.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of an important
Yes.
metaphor for just living life, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because sometimes we might have an idea of where we want to be, but
Hmm.
sometimes we don't think about all the steps that we're going to need to
That's
take
right.
to get there.
That's
So
right.
anyway, I just wanted to add that little
I
piece of
appreciate that.
so many little nourishing
Yes.
nuggets that came out of my journey, and that was one of them.
And I think that that lack of competition, right? I played soccer competitively in high school and middle school, and so I'm used to my physical activity being in comparison with someone else's. And so this was a very different, it's just me. I'm the only person that can get myself to the top, and I get to decide how far I want to go. And so that was such a different experience. And I was so grateful for Miguel, our incredible guide. He would, okay, I'll see you at the top. And he just kind of Billy goated his way up there at different points in time. And then he'd wait for me at different moments until I got there. And we'd sit and we'd talk and I'd catch my breath and then we'd do it again. And so, you'll see if you're looking at our photos, I'm taking a picture with a bunch of alpaca and llamas because they had these little spots along the way where you could stop and get your passport stamped, or you could get a picture with an alpaca or a llama, and just take in the sights, which were so incredible. And it took me about 45 minutes to get to the top fully, but honestly, getting to the top of that mountain was such an incredible experience to be able to look around and say, my body got me here. My resilience, my persistence, my preparation got me here. I didn't sleep well the night before because I was excited, but I was also a little bit worried of like, what if I can't make it? What if I've been training this whole time and I can't make it? And of course, with Lydia there, I'm still saying to her, I'm like, we'll go as far as we can. We'll go as far as we can. And on the inside, I'm like, I don't think I can go all the way. I don't know if I can go, right? But getting to that top and really being able to just experience the beauty of nature and to feel completely unplugged and to feel completely present in my
Mhm.
body, in my accomplishments, and also to be connected to this other beautiful human that I got to meet along the way, Miguel, who was so incredible and such a wonderful human to us. And I remember we got down, that night that afternoon we went and had lunch afterwards. And of course, Lydia and I are starving because we burned all these calories. And on that same day, which I didn't share this with you, Elaine, but on that same day, actually, my dad was having heart surgery.
Oh
And
my
so
gosh.
I had been off the radar, like I didn't have a signal because we were so remote. And so I just had spent all morning going, I hope by the time I get back to civilization, to a cell phone signal, that I'm going to get an update on my dad's heart surgery. And, as soon as we sat down to eat, I sent a text to my stepmom and she texted me right back and she said, he just got out. Everything went really well. Right. And I just immediately, the relief of, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just climbed this physical mountain and now this emotional mountain coming down on the other side. And I remember sitting at that table crying, and our tour guide Miguel just sat there and rubbed my arm and said like, it's okay, I'm going to keep your dad in my prayers. And I was like, thank you. He's like, I didn't even know. And I was like, yeah, I've just been kind of holding it, the excitement of the mountain and the fear of my dad's surgery and knowing that that was coming was a lot. And so it was such an incredible experience to move through all that. And I think something that you and I have talked a lot about, Elaine, and I think about the back to that concept of Aini was really that I couldn't have done this trip without my sister by my
Hmm.
side.
Hmm.
She is, she's my baby sister. She's 15 years younger than I am. I grew up caring for her and her colic for the first, year of her life. I was the colic master carrying her around at night. Um, and it's been so beautiful to see her blossom into this young woman and to be able to connect with each other, but to connect around everything from, our family's heritage of faith to our family's heritage of being Mexican and indigenous, and being able to connect as sisters in a different way. She has been such a beautiful and supportive person to me in the last 2 years as I've navigated a pretty nasty divorce. And she has just continuously showed up for me in the most beautiful ways. And so to get to celebrate her and to do all these fun, cool things together, but also to challenge her to push herself as an older sibling, wanting to see my younger siblings grow and challenge themselves was really, I think, that connection over and over again, which was so beautiful. And I know you've talked about on your journey how having people there to lean on and support you is so important to the process when you're doing hard things.
Well, and there's something about what you're saying about, a shared history.
Yeah,
Like you said about, your Mexican heritage and your indigenous heritage, which, is also reflects mine. Right before I was getting ready to
yeah,
leave, I had done my ancestry.com a long time ago, but they're always updating it. And I knew that I
yeah.
had a certain percentage from Spain. And so, my husband actually sent it to me. I think it was the day before the first day of the Camino. And 25% of my DNA is from Spain. And it's
Wow.
actually a good portion of it is from Galicia, where I walked. So I
Wow.
could not but help but think about that ancestor, which I believe it was Antonio Pineda, who must have been quite an adventurer, who I never knew, my great
Yeah.
grandfather, that would have transversed the European continent through Africa, through Senegal, I believe, and crossed the ocean to El Salvador, where also I have indigenous roots as well, as you
Mhm,
know. But
mhm.
what was so interesting to me was feeling that historical, um, generational
Yeah,
energy. And I
yeah,
don't know if hadn't talked about that before, but did you
yeah.
feel that as you were walking?
Absolutely. I felt it while I
Yeah.
was walking. I felt it when we connected with people through, bringing us in for homestays and things like that. I felt that connection constantly. And being able to even, go into places like we went to this beautiful church that they call basically like the Sistine Chapel of the Andes. And it was absolutely gorgeous. But, being able to have conversations about our legacy of faith in our family and how that affects how we understand spirituality and what our purpose is in this life in the first place, which is, in my opinion, to care for each other. And so that was such a beautiful experience. And it was actually Lydia's first time in Latin America, period. So she got to be fully immersed in Spanish, which is, a language that we grew up hearing around our house. And that was the first time that she got to, experience what it's like to be amongst a group of people speaking a language that you don't know, but you have this genetic connection to.
I mean, I so agree with you because, of course, my family history is similar. Is that I grew up
Mhm.
hearing Spanish all the time, even though at that time, I'm in my 70s, there was a decision that was made that they didn't want to teach us
Yes.
Spanish, which I think was so, limited sighting at that time. But anyway, I've
Yeah.
learned it on my own, but certainly I'm not as fluent as I would like to be. But it was so great to hear Spanish, to hear the original, kind of the origins of where the Spanish of Central America came from, and also to feel that I was somewhat proficient enough that
Yeah.
I was in some spaces where I had to do some bargaining and some negotiating, and I was able to do it well enough. But there
Yeah.
was something also about that history that
Yeah.
was, part of the experience of that interconnectedness to the past into the present,
Yeah.
that I also felt. And I love that your sister got to experience that alongside with you as well, Kay.
Yeah, and it was so beautiful. We had, one of our last days there, we had a homestay at this island in the middle of Lake Titicaca, which is the highest navigable lake in the world. And so then we were on this little island, and I hiked to the very top of this island to a temple there and did a spiritual walk there as well. But we got to stay with this homestay of folks who they didn't speak English at all. They only spoke Spanish and Quechua and another indigenous language. And so it was a beautiful experience to be able to go, oh my gosh, I understand enough that I'm interpreting for our other tourist who's staying with us and my little sister into Spanish, and then the father of the household would take that and then translate that into Quechua with his wife. And so
Yes,
it was like we're
yes.
using 3 or 4 languages back and forth right now. But they were so gracious in sharing their space with us and sharing their culture with us. And, there was so much connection that felt very similar to, what Lydia and I have experienced growing up, me partially being raised by my grandparents and getting to, experience that in real time was so incredible. And then really just on our last day, as we left that space, I just, I was crying because it was our last day and we're getting ready to get on the plane and I'm feeling so overwhelmed. And I just looked out over this giant flatland area that we were passing because there was a storm that was rolling in. And there was just this beautiful rainbow at the end, that it was just this consistent reminder for me that, like, even in all of the hard things we experienced on this trip, all the difficult things I've been through over the last 2 years in particular, there's always that hope that exists, right? It brings me back to that story of Elpis and Pandora's box, that there's always hope that remains, even in the midst of the difficult things. There's always beauty and growth. And yeah, it was incredible to do that with Lydia in particular.
Well, I'm just so absolutely touched by your experience, and I'm really now kind of getting myself all worked up about wanting to talk
Yeah.
about my experience, and I'm going to do that after the break. So we're going to take a short break, and then I'll come back and talk a little bit about the Camino, and then Kay and I are going to do a little bit more dialoguing about the shared experiences that we've had as my dear colleague in their 30s and me in my 70s, and how even with these age differences that we can have these incredibly rich physical, emotional, spiritual experiences of life, and that we can share them together. So we'll be back in just a couple minutes, and we will continue our our journey together today. Welcome back. I'm here with Kay Thomas, and they were the two of us are talking about our shared experiences. Kay went to Peru and had many experiences with all the beauty of Peru, and we just had a discussion about it. And then I had a similar experience, though I was in Spain. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey that is different, but similar expressions and ideas and reflections. I think of what happened to me. Kay, I think as we were talking earlier in the week, also happened to you. So let me tell you a little bit first about the Camino de Santiago, or the Way of St. James, is one of the world's oldest pilgrimages. And so, for more than 1,000 years, people from every walk of life have traveled across Europe to the Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela in northwestern Spain, where tradition holds that the remains of the Apostle James are buried. And so what began as a religious pilgrimage has become much more. So today people walk the Camino for many reasons. I met people who were seeking healing, they were grieving a loved one, they were celebrating their life. They were trying to find clarity in terms of some challenge that they were experiencing in their life. And they also, I think many people they didn't know why they wanted to go, but they were just called to go. And I think for me, that was part of it. There was a calling for me to walk the Camino. I had heard about it, I had seen a number of movies about it, and there was something about the physicality of it that I also thought was important for me in my 70s, that to challenge myself a bit about what that would be like. So I felt that regardless of all the people that I met, and myself included, and people would often say this, you may have ideas of what you want to get out of the Camino, but the Camino will give you experiences, and it's almost like the Camino will know what you need. And
Mm.
one of the amazing aspects of walking the Camino is everyone who sees you, they know that you're walking. You could be in a city, um, and you may have a backpack on, and they'll say to you, "Buen Camino."
Mm.
And "Buen Camino, buen Camino." And so it's this incredible greeting of "have a good journey." And there was something about the energy of that when you talked a little bit earlier about that spirituality, that having that intention being said to you over and over again was definitely part of of what was nurturing for me. And I still can't believe when I look back to it, I go, I walked 106 kilometers of the Camino. Now I began in Astorga, and then I later continued actually and started my official counting of my kilometers in Saria. And I was accompanied by my son. And although he and I often walked at different paces, because he's much faster than me, he's very athletic. His youthful stride, I will say, was much quicker than mine. But we shared something far deeper than the miles themselves. I think we shared an experience that I'm going to treasure for the rest of my life. And there was also something about that we could start together, and that because we're also very independent, that he could continue on his own and I could continue on my own. And I think that was kind of interwoven into the lessons of the Camino. But I want to tell you about all the expectations I had. And on the very first day, so what he was riding a bicycle for the first 3 days, and I was walking as far as I could, and then I would take a cab to the destination where we had planned to meet. So on my very first day, I'd been walking for 6 miles. I had just met this lovely couple from California, and my phone rang, and it was my son, and he was letting me know where to meet him. So as I'm talking to him, which I should have stopped, um, I had not such a graceful stumble. It was more than a stumble. It was a very hard fall, and it was on my left side of my face. There was lots of bleeding. My face immediately puffed up. I was really a little bit shocky in the beginning. It was such a hard fall. So I'll say that by the time I looked in a mirror, I resembled what I jokingly called I was the prize fighter pilgrim. And as you probably are bringing that picture up, I also have some pictures that you can certainly see my bruised face and scrapes that announced to everyone I had met the Camino in a very personal way. So my meeting was also on the
Yes.
ground, on my face. Yes. So it was such an interesting thing because like people are going, "Oh my gosh, you fell! How terrible!" And I didn't know, when I first felt, is it going to affect me walking the rest of the Camino? I'm going to say that it didn't. Um, but as someone, as many of you know, whose life's work has been devoted to helping others heal, I am usually the one offering assistance. Yet within moments of my fall, the roles were definitely reversed. I had no choice. I had to rely on the kindness of strangers,
Yeah,
literally. So the Camino quietly reminded me that those who spend their lives caring for others must also learn, okay, to receive care, right?
that's
Which I
right.
think you may know that's not necessarily my strong point. So
And you
what a
spent so much time preparing for this trip and even all the preparation. You can't
yes.
always prepare for everything.
No, no, I didn't prepare for the fall with all my preparation. So, but I thought it was interesting. So the man and wife I'd met from California, the man's name was Kenneth, and my father-in-law's name was Kenneth. He lived in our home for over 30 years. He died at the ripe old age of 105. He was such a wise, wonderful man who always nurtured me. So here I have a man named Kenneth who, with his wife, came up to me quite quickly and knew I was very injured and there was, blood everywhere, etc. And he said, "Not to worry. This is my third Camino and I have a service and I can call a taxi." He was very calm and his voice was very calming to me. And my son, by the way, who I was talking to when I fell, he's hearing all this commotion going on and not knowing what's happening. And Kenneth took the phone and talked to my son and just let my son know that we were going to get me to him, which was about a 45-minute drive from where I fell. So this gentleman named Kenneth was so kind. They called the cab, and when the cab arrived, he and his wife literally steered me, because I was very shaky, as you can imagine, having fallen as hard as I did. And I turned to his wife and I thanked her and I thanked him. And I noticed that she had a effigy of the Buddha around her neck.
Mm.
And I asked her where she was originally from. And she said Vietnam. And I said, "Oh, well, as I'm leaving you, may the teachings of the Buddha guide your way." And she looked at me and she had a bracelet on, and she took her bracelet that she had made from the tree, which were beads, with a little effigy of the Buddha on the beads, on the bead bracelet. And she gave it to me. She goes, "May you take my
Mm-hmm.
bracelet for healing." I mean, I can feel tears welling up in my eyes a little bit as I'm telling that story because it was so kind of her. So I'm talking to the cab driver now has arrived, and her name was Angel, Angel.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh my goodness. So Kenneth has just helped me. This is more reflection after the fat K. And then Angel is there taking me to my son. So Angel had
Mm-hmm.
has a cab service, and so she had planned a short trip, and I heard her on the phone changing her plans so she could take me the 45 minutes, which would take me to the city that my son was at.
Mm-hmm.
She was so kind, and like you, I was very happy that my Spanish, we had a lovely conversation for 45 minutes, but my son called. He said, "Mom, stop at La Cruz de Fierro. You're going to be going past it. And if she can maybe help you, it's just a little bit of a hill, but I know that was someplace you wanted to see." And I said, "Oh, you're right." And I brought a stone. People bring stones from around the world, from home, or that they find on the way. And I had a stone that said dream. And I had brought it from home because I wanted to dream about what is my present and my future in the way that I will spend the rest of my days. And so I asked her, and she said, "I've never stopped there myself." And here she goes past it all the time with her cab. So she was so kind. We stopped, and I had to take her arm because, as you know, I was wobbly. So she guided me up this little teeny hill, and there were all these stones with sayings, and there was written little letters and intentions from all the really thousands of people that walk the Camino. That was also so dear
Mm-hmm.
to be able to drop my stone. And I looked at the picture that I took of where I dropped it later, and I saw that right above it was my daughter's name that you know well, Jessica. And I thought, oh my gosh, my daughter was there with me, almost as if the Camino was telling me, yes, you're with your son, but you're with your daughter as well, which also makes me tear up a bit when I think about
Mm-hmm.
that, because that was serendipitous. It wasn't something that I had planned, of course.
Yeah.
And so then, as we get back in the car, Kay, um, I I think, okay, we're going to go to the city. And when we arrived at the city, my son was waiting for me. He was so kind. And there was a restaurant that we were the only one. It was kind of like early in the morning, about 11. And the person at the restaurant, his name was Domingo, which I say Sunday. And Sunday can be a healing day for everyone in terms of how people celebrate their spiritual experiences. It's certainly in Spain in terms of the Catholicism that is integrated into the way. But he welcomed me with such warmth, and he took one look at me and said, "Oh, Senora, oh my goodness, what happened to you?" And he immediately escorts me to the pharmacy. This little teeny little village didn't have a hospital, but it had a pharmacy. And the pharmacist said to me, "Oh, the nurse is here today. The nurse is a traveling nurse and gives usually vaccinations. So she takes me to this little teeny clinic where the nurse is sitting there." And I have to tell you, the nurse's name was Edison. And I said to Edison, I said, and I'm speaking Spanish, of course, I said, "That's not usually a name that I hear in Spain." And he said, "Oh, my parents loved Thomas Edison." So as I was reflecting about it later, what does Edison mean? To me, it means the light. And when I'm thinking and reflecting back, I realized that more than all these people that I met, there was a grace in thinking about the lesson that the way was showing me. Um, and what did I need? I needed to be reminded that resilience is not about falling. Resilience is about allowing ourselves to be held by others
Mm.
until we're ready to walk again, right? And when you talk about
Yes.
your sister, right, and how she held you through your divorce, and I imagine
Mm-hmm.
there was others that held you, right? And
Mm-hmm.
how important that is for human connection that we
Yes.
remember that.
Yes.
So yes, that first day changed the entire pilgrimage. And so what was going to be more walking during those first 3 days, of course, was less walking because, like you, I had to pay attention to
Yes.
my body and remind myself that part of paying attention to my body was saying, well, I think this next day I'm going to have to rest. And so I did rest. And so, but I did then walk again, and I walked to on my direction to one of the most beautiful villages on the route, which is in it's O Cibrero. And when we talk about, there is a church there that has been having services for over 1,000 years. So some
Wow.
of, yes. So some of you that will be looking at this on YouTube, you'll see an image of four people. It's myself and my son and these two lovely people that I ended up translating for from Australia. He actually was a professor of psychology from Australia, which you know with my work. I thought, of course, I'm going to be meet a professor from Australia. And and so you meet people along the way that are holding the space for you. And so this photo represents the people, the woman with the great smile. I had forgotten my glasses and this incredible healing cloth, wet cloth that I would wear for the hot weather, and I left it. And she found it. And we just happened serendipitously then to stay with her sister and her sister's close friend at the same hotel in the next city, and they were able to bring my glasses to me and my wonderful wet cloth that kept me cool during my Camino. So I'm saying that these little gifts that were given along the way, they weren't, some of them were small, some of them were bigger, but I think they were also about receiving, the
Mhm.
continuation of receiving on the Camino. So I guess that rather than measuring success by how many kilometers I could complete, I began measuring this journey by moments of connection, right?
Mm.
And gratitude and, certainly humility. Here I'm feeling very strong in my 74-year-old body, and I fall the first day and thinking, okay, this is part of it. But you know what, Kay? I think I am strong because
Mhm.
there are days that I walk 16 miles in one day. And I remember at the end of
Yeah.
the day going, I don't know if I can walk the next day. I'd go to sleep, and goodness gracious, I would wake up and I would be able to walk the next day.
Mm.
So it's that same humility that you talked about when you were walking up the high altitude, not knowing if you were going to be able to make it up there.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that, again, that the Camino taught me that vulnerability, um, it's not the opposite of resilience. It's one of the great teachers of
Yeah.
resilience,
Yeah.
right? And I never thought about it that way before this experience. Vulnerability is one of the great teachers of resilience.
That's right.
How we show up in the world. But I
Mhm.
want to say a little bit too about walking with my son, which was one of the greatest gifts of the experiences. As I said, there were stretches that we walked together and many stretches that we walked apart. We each found our own rhythm, and I tend to be pretty talkative. Sometimes I think I've been too talkative for him, like, Mom, be quiet. So I really tried to measure myself in a way that I
Yeah.
tried to be really reflective of not only what I needed, but hopefully that I could be very present to the journey together. And I
Mhm.
think that we both accomplished that. Um, so only 2 years ago, Kay, and you know this, I was not in very good physical condition, or could I imagine walking a journey like this? But yet, like you, step by step, day by day, found myself that I could reach the Camino. And,
Mhm.
I have pictures of myself in front of a sign, the Camino to Santiago. And I remember, oh my gosh, getting there and seeing that sign. And I'm going, oh, I'm finally here at the city.
Mhm.
And then I was texting my son, and he said, "Well, Mom, you got 45 more minutes to get to the cathedral." And I
And you're
thought,
like,
"Oh
what?
my God, 45 more minutes." It's like it was so hot. I thought, "Can I really do it?"
Mm.
Um, but I think that, again, thinking about myself reaching Santiago, the Camino became living proof that also, and I want to say this, aging is not simply about what we lose. It's also discovering capacities we never knew that
Yes.
we had. So anyone who's older, they're going, gosh, maybe I've lived most of my life, which of course I have,
Mm.
but goodness, I have just done something that I wouldn't, if you would have told me 2 years ago that I would walk 106 kilometers in a week, I'd say,
Yeah.
only in my dreams, but that wasn't in my dream. It was in reality.
Yeah.
So I think as we're talking here, as we're both, here you are, your youthful self, and here we are, my older self. Growth doesn't stop with
No.
age, right? Neuroscience tells us that the brain continues to change throughout our lives. The nervous systems continues to learn, to adapt and heal. Hope itself remains biologically possible, right? The hope of you getting up that rainbow mountain. with the
Hmm.
high altitude. The hope of me finishing something at my age. I was really one of the older people that I saw, but there are many people that were seniors that walked the Camino, that we are capable of building resilience at every stage of our life. I think that was one of the great messages for me. And and I think that, like you, the Camino offered, I think something, that I've taught for years through the community resiliency model. It's that resilience doesn't come with the absence of struggle,
That's right.
right? It is our capacity to not only continue through the struggle, to reconnect and to move forward, not necessarily without bruises. Certainly, you saw
Right.
mine, right? And I
Yeah.
still have a bit of a bruise. I covered up with makeup today. But those bruises are part of our living in our life,
Hmm.
and they also are there to embrace. So we can reconnect and move forward even after we've fallen. So yes, I arrived at, this in Santiago. I had sore muscles, tired feet. Oh my gosh, I was so hot. I was so, as I said, heart. I was so hot, but I had a grateful heart. I think that's what I really meant to say.
Hmm.
And arrived with the deepest appreciation, that also the healing is rarely a solitary journey, is it?
Yeah.
Yes, we can do part of it on our own, but we need other people to move through it. And we need companions. You needed your sister. I needed my son. And sometimes my son, because he was always ahead of me, right? He'd be at the next city. He knew I was coming because he could spot me on his iPhone. He'd have a big, tall glass of ice water waiting for me out in the
Mm.
street so that he knew that I needed that. So we all need moments of surrender. We all need people to become our Kenneths, our angels, our Domingos, our Edisons, our sisters, our sons. Um,
Mhm.
and the Camino is also a reminder, I think, to life itself. You know, and also what you did in Machu Picchu, if I can say it, if please disagree with me if you do. We begin with a destination in mind, and it is the people we meet, the amazing indigenous people that you shared with us,
Mhm.
the unexpected detours, the moments of vulnerability, the kindness we receive along the way. That I
Mhm.
think that's what transforms us. So I guess that the greatest accomplishment is not arriving at the destination. It's the discovering
Mhm.
while walking toward it. So there you go.
That's right. That's right.
So
It's
what do
beautiful.
you say at this moment?
Ah, there are so many things that are coming up for me, and I think the biggest piece that you named is I keep coming back to it over and over again, and I think it's something I've come back to in my life so many times is that healing and growth is about connection and community. It's not just something we do alone, it's something that we do together. And I mean, I think about Bell Hooks and the quote, right? Rarely, if ever, are we healed in isolation. Healing is an act of communion. And that
Yes.
ability, the conversations I had with my sister along the way about her own struggles in the last, couple of years of her adulthood and learning about herself and growing and the healing
Yeah.
she's experienced in her own spiritual and faith growth and journey. That was, it was a different journey than mine, but it was still a
Yes.
journey that was happening and to be able to share that with her and to be able to look back even on my own life and right, she's 15 years younger than I am and to say, to speak into those moments for her of like I hear where you're at and I've been where you're at and one foot in front of the other. It's okay to take a break. It's okay to reset yourself. It's okay to get some new perspective, but keep going. And it was such an incredible experience. And I think about even the way that your son was able to provide that compassion to you of like there you knew that ice water was going to be there at the end of every day, which
Yeah,
is
he had that.
incredible.
Or just even the guidance saying, Mom, you got only 2 kilometers left.
Yeah.
Just that it's like what you said, Miguel gave you,
Cheering you on.
like, yeah, he goes, okay, you can do this. And he did
Yeah.
that for me. And the last photo I have, that those of you are going to see this on YouTube, are my shoes and my walking sticks. And when I think about that, that was also part of the journey, that
Yeah.
we have ways to get to places. We have
Yeah.
instruments that help us, right?
That's right.
In
That's
all
right.
different kinds of ways to get to where we're going to be. And that's also part of the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think all the people we met along the way, whether it was, meeting people on the train that we talked to, or meeting people, we got to meet another person who did a homestay with us who was from New Zealand and she was backpacking through all of Latin America. And so we just spent 36 hours with a stranger, but got to know her well. And, those moments where it's all of those things along the way. And, I will say, even Lydia and I, some of the things we researched more and some of the things we researched less. And we didn't research as much our last 2 days where we would be doing our homestay in the middle of Lake Titicaca. And we did some more research the night before and we were like, oh my gosh, this is like way more physically challenging than we thought it was going to be. And we were like, I don't know if I have the energy for two more hikes at high altitude. Like, I'm just not sure if I can do that. And it was like, well, one of the hikes, if you don't go, then you don't get lunch. You got to stay on a boat for three
Yes,
hours and wait. So you can be hungry, but you don't get to eat.
that's right.
And I was like, well, I want to eat. But, so there were those pieces, but being able to really, even in those moments where we were both like, I don't know if I can do that again, to be able to really sit with each other and say, you know what? We'll go as far as we can. We'll do what we can.
We'll go
We'll
as
go as far
far
as
as
we
we
can.
can. I
Yeah.
love that. We'll go as far as we can. At the end of the journey, one of the reasons I think, one of the reasons that I think my son also offered to go with me is I'd
Mm,
always hoped to go with my husband, and I certainly
mm,
had him in my heart when we were walking. He's been having some physical problems, so he couldn't walk with us.
yeah.
But my son said to me before, he said, "Well, Mom, if you get in better shape, maybe I'll walk with you." And so he
Mm,
actually came to Claremont, and he wanted to kind of test me. So we walked the mountain. He goes, "Oh, Mom, you're in good shape." So I guess I proved to him that I'd gotten in better shape. But I thanked him at the end and said, "Eric, thank you so much for coming with me. I really could not have done it without you," because he had to take time off of his job and
yeah.
everything that he did to come with me. And so he said something so kind back to me. He goes, "Well, Mom, you haven't been that kind of physical person in your life."
Mm,
He goes, "What you did was impressive." And I have to say, that was probably one of the nicest compliments everyone has given to me, because I think what you did is impressive. What I did, and what so many people do when they go on a pilgrimage, whether to Machu Picchu, whether to Spain, whether to your
mm,
own, someplace in your own backyard, where you sit and you contemplate your spirituality and your place on this planet. It's impressive that we take time to give us space,
yeah.
however we do that. So I really want to say to my listeners today that, we always say, and, Kay, I know, has something tattooed on
I
them.
do. I do.
So what can you tell them what you have tattooed?
Yeah, right here I have it says what else is true? And this is actually in
Yes.
Elaine's handwriting.
Yes. So,
Yeah.
so what else is true for both Kay and I, right? Is that we did something that was hard. We trained for it. We practiced. It had some unexpected gifts, and it had many, many gifts that we couldn't have ever imagined. And it had connection and love and relationship. And
Mm.
so, what would you like to say, your last words, Kay, to our audience today?
I think I just keep coming back to really the biggest lesson that I was reminded of is Aini and that piece again of how do I care for myself and so that I can care for other people around me? And how do I care for my community so that we can move forward together?
And so, I will just add from what you're saying, my final words is also how we also give space to receive help from others.
That's right.
Because that certainly was a
That's right.
very prominent lesson in the very beginning of my journey. So, for our listeners, thank you so much for coming and listening to our Resiliency Within podcast, and going on the journey with Kay and I today. And may you remember what else is true, and give some space in your life for quiet, for contemplation, thinking about where you are in the present moment, and maybe what journey you want to continue on, or maybe start anew. So until we meet again, it's Elaine Miller Karras, with great gratitude to Kay Thomas for coming along with me today, and for all of you for listening. Until we meet again, what else is true?